Just like I said, that's like what I said in my example. So do you disagree with this example? If I put a ball and put it on the table, that because that ball is not moving, that it stops being a ball?
I have to be honest with you. I have no idea how you're making this sequential leap. I would call it non sequitur here. I think what you're saying does not follow from my point that I made.
Okay, then let me try to educate on how it does. You mentioned something that was irrelevant, which was motion. You're engaged in some debate, which is about motion, but you're not engaged in this debate, which is about geometry. The shape of the Earth is what we are debating here. It's flat Earth versus round Earth. So motion is not stated anywhere in that bracket that we have agreed to. Flat Earth is a shape. Round Earth is a shape. Whether that disc is spinning, going lopsided, or being thrown like a frisbee by God's dog doesn't matter in this debate. We're talking about the shape, the geometry, and that is a direct response to what you said. So actually, no, it's not a non sequitur.
Okay, well, I guess I would have to default on the fact that I wasn't given enough information to make certain statements that weren't going to go against the agreed upon parameters, because you seem to be quoting something that was in existence before I came into the arena tonight. But
I'm quoting you directly.
Okay. No. What I mean is, I felt like you were giving me the parameters of the debate itself. Like, okay, we had this information beforehand. We're talking about the shape itself. So, I guess, again, I thought that there was a little bit of flexibility in terms of arguing for my position.
I'm more than happy to talk about the motion of the Earth, but that is a different subject, because then we get into the idea of geocentrism versus heliocentrism and some other type of sensism, whatever the fuck we want to call it. But that is a different debate.
Okay. All right. So one thing that I would follow up with is to say that context, I think, would be the key to understanding the meaning of level and flat. So, it would be a non sequitur for you to bring up a leaning shelf, because we're not talking about leaning shelves. We're talking about the horizon at its base. And so, when we're talking about the horizon is both level and flat. So, there's my context for giving you those two terms as synonymous.
Okay, you can go ahead and use them in a synonymous way, but I'm telling you that you will be at odds with literally everybody else that knows how words work. And just as Jared said earlier, words are important. Level does not mean flat. The reason why I gave the shelf example was, again, in a direct response to what you said. So again, it's not a non sequitur. The reason why I give that to you is to tell you to be careful. When you say level means flat, then basically you're saying that everything that's level is automatically flat. I do not agree with that, and I will not be moving forward with that assumption. Assumptions make an ass out of you and me. So that's why I say, if we are going to look at something as level, I'm not going to make the jump to therefore it means flat, because I agree that water is level, but I disagree that the waters of the oceans of the world are flat. And I have observations that show that they are actually not flat, as linked in the description of this debate.
Okay, well then I would counter that with responding to your definition of level, which I think that you based upon gravity. Is that correct?
Gravity?
You gave a definition of level when you were talking about the difference between a shelf being flat and level, and then you identified
perpendicular to the pole of gravity. You were asking for my definition. Yes, it means perpendicular to the pole of gravity. Laser levels take gravity into account.
Right. Well, obviously I would disagree with that definition of level, because I do not assume gravity. So we are not going to agree on that meaning of the word level.
No, you disagree with gravity in a scientific sense. But you and I do agree that there is some force that has a downward pull, right? Whether you think
Could
whether
you?
you think it's
Could,
whether you think it's the curvature of space-time or whether you think it's density, it doesn't matter. There is some force that is keeping us anchored to the ground right now, correct?
I do not assume that. No.
Okay, then why isn't shit just randomly floating around? Why do things fall in the vacuum, for example?
Well, I think you're asking two different questions. So why aren't things randomly floating around? Why should they be?
Because if you have no force holding you there, then there's no reason why they would stick to the ground in the first place.
And your justification for that statement is what?
By the mere fact that if you have nothing to facilitate something happening, then that thing is not going to happen. You're literally trying to say that 0 equals 1 here.
No, I'm not. I'm actually asking you to justify the statements that you're making. You're making
No,
claims. I'm asking you to justify them.
No, I'm asking you to justify your assumption that if there is absolutely no reason why something should be anchored to the ground, that it should stay anchored to the ground. I have no reason for something happening. It's happening. Tell me how this logic makes sense.
I have no experience of something happening, therefore I don't believe it should happen. Okay, so when you say, why aren't
No, you do
things
have
just
experience.
random? Okay,
You
when
do have
say,
experience.
Okay, when you say, why don't things randomly float around, I don't have an experience of things randomly floating around, so I'm not going to assume that things should. I do not ask those questions.
Maybe that's your problem.
No, it's not my problem because I don't have an experience that tells me that I should be asking the question, why am I not floating in the air right now?
Well, again, the fact that you're not asking that question right now is, again, a problem. Because if you're looking at objects around you, I have a fucking quarter. I let it go. Why does it do that? If you have no answer for that, if you have no explanation on why that is the case, then you really can't speak to anything that has gravitational consequence. You can't speak to water sticking to a ball, or in this case, a flat Earth. You can't explain why your container actually justifies anything that you're saying. You literally cannot use fundamental forces around you that are influenced in any way, shape, or form by gravity to make any point in the future ever. Because you are essentially cutting it off right at the head. Why does it do that?
Because it's heavier than the air in which it is falling.
So you say that density is the reason why objects fall, correct?
I am going to say that density is the reason why an object travels through a medium until it reaches a more dense medium through which it cannot pass.
Cool. So density gradients provide the directional force for objects to fall, correct?
Density gradients provide the... Say it again?
Directional influence for objects to fall, correct?
That sounds fine. Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. So if I put this object in the vacuum, thus eliminating density gradients, why do objects still fall?
You've simply changed the medium so that if you have, it's no different. It's just the most, I guess the horrible way to put it is the most least dense medium. So, for instance, how about
there is no medium in a vacuum?
I know. Just hold on for a second and just go with me conceptually. We start off with water in the container and we drop the quarter. We empty the container of water and it has air. Okay? It still drops through. Now, we empty the container of air and it still drops through. I don't have a reason to postulate something outside of my experience other than the fact that it is still falling through a less dense medium, whether or not that medium is at 0 or -10 or whatever, because it's still in my world. It's still right there in front of me. Okay?
But your world,
so, I mean,
But the world that you are describing has an inherent contradiction. You're saying that the reason why objects fall is because of a medium. If you drop a quarter through water, it's going to fall at a slow rate. Empty the water, slightly lighter medium, less, let's say less thickness of medium, it falls faster. And then you get rid of even more medium, it falls faster. It seems to me that if that density gradient of a certain medium is the reason why objects fall, it seems that it falls more efficiently when we get rid of the medium. So it's almost like medium that you are referring to is not the cause of objects falling. If anything, it's fighting against it based on what you just described. So how can something be against something yet for something in that exact case?
I would have to go back and hear myself. I don't know that I said that the medium is the cause. I think that I was just saying that the medium is that through which the object is passing.
I said that I asked you a question point blank, which was, so density gradients of the medium provide the directional influence of the object. And you said, yes, that sounds great.
Okay, so you're implying that the density is the cause of something
No,
falling?
I'm saying that's what you believe. And I'm pointing out problems with saying what you just said. If you're saying that density gradients are the reason why objects fall, then you have to describe to me or explain to me why objects fall in a vacuum when we get rid of those density gradients.
Yeah, I would, again, the weight of a thing is the reason why it passes through the medium. So the medium is simply that through which it is passing. I wasn't trying to be specific in terms of saying that the medium causes or the medium is the reason why a thing falls, regardless of whether or not you inferred that from my statement. Again, I'm just going to simply go back that if we look at different mediums with different densities, and we have the lightest medium at the top, whatever measurement that is, that's just where you're going to start. And if you create a medium in a container where you evacuate what you think is there or what you know is there, I just don't draw the conclusion that that quarter should be floating in that vacuum of space, whatever it is in that container. So I'm not going to draw the same conclusions you are. I'm not assuming. I think that there are certain things that you assume in your worldview that lead you to ask questions that I don't. So for instance, when I'm talking to someone and I say, I don't believe in gravity, I have had this question more often than not. Well, then what's holding us to the ground? You see, I don't ask that question. My question back to that person is, why are you asking that question? What is it that's making you ask, and what is it that you think is happening that should lead to something else happening? So, I mean, I guess that's as far as I can go with. I don't think that giving a vacuum in a container is then justification to say, look, there's gravity, because it wasn't there before in the natural atmosphere. At 10,000 feet, at 5,000 feet, at 1,000, at 10, whatever. And then when it hit water, it hit another medium. Gravity didn't all of a sudden come into play. It was never there to begin with. So that's a leap. No, it actually is backwards. You don't ask the question, but I do, because that is the natural progression of trying to figure out what our world is actually. Because you don't make the jump to ask the obvious next question does not mean that anyone is at fault for anything for just asking you the same exact question. Then what is holding us to the ground? And when trying to figure out what actually is gravity, what is this downward force in your worldview, we're actually getting a contradictory answer. And that's why I'm capitalizing on it, because what you are describing to me does not make any sense. If anything, everything that you described to me negates gravity, doesn't support gravity. And so to use gravity in your arguments, or to say that it just flat out doesn't exist, leads me to believe that the only reason you're saying that is because you have a misunderstanding of what gravity is and how it actually works and how it can be demonstrated and verified and how it doesn't comport with what you think gravity is. I didn't write this down. You had said something early on about the statement that I made about someone asking a question that would be natural for them, and then if I don't ask that question, it's because of my lack of understanding. So you said that it's a natural